Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Gurudev. I go to Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari
How are you doing? Especially with the words of Princeton. How are you all doing? Yes. So, humble request, please come closer so the speaker can feel connected to you all. Yeah. Come closer, Matajis. Come a little bit forward. That way, if people come later, devotees, then they have space too. Shri Sachin Dev ki jai, Shri Lakshmi Narasimha Bhagwan ki jai, Shri Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, Prabhuji? So, you all, some of you were able to observe Abhishek of Shri Lakshmi Narasimha Dev, yes? So, thank you for coming. And now, we'll have a presentation by His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhuji. So, how many of you here have not heard of Chaitanya Charan Prabhu? So, you don't really need me to introduce Prabhuji, but I'll do it for my own happiness to do so. So, Prabhuji is a disciple of His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj, who's disciple of His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. So, I'll kind of talk about some of the formal things as far as accomplishments in spiritual service. So, Prabhuji has been serving as a teacher, spiritual teacher, a guide for several decades. I think somewhere like 25 years or so, Prabhuji, is that right? So, and he's also well regarded for his deep understanding of the scriptures. That's why he's part of the Shastric Advisory Committee to the GBC. You have to have a lot of understanding of our scriptures and application and being able to resolve apparent contradictions, etc., to be part of that group. So Prabhuji is a very important part of that group. Prabhuji is also the associate editor of Back to Godhead. How many of you get Back to Godhead? Only a couple? It's really wonderful book. We can maybe sign you up to get it on a regular basis. So it reaches out across the whole world, and Prabhuji, almost every time I get it, I'm looking forward to an article that I'm going to get to read from you and absorb myself. So those are, Prabhuji is also hosting a Spiritual Scientist and Gita Daily. How many of you look at Gita Daily fairly regularly? Okay. Yes. I always hear everyone when they're reciting Gita or talking about Gita, reciting some comment or explanation given by Chaitanya Charan Prabhuji. So we know his explanations are far-reaching. I think last time, from what I understood, there are over 1 million daily hits, so-called hits on the website, which is pretty impressive when you think about something being purely a spiritual website. To have that kind of attraction means it must have some relevance to people in their lives for them to do that. So thank you very much, Prabhuji, for doing that wonderful service. So I wanted to just say some things that
So this is Narasimha's appearance day. Let us
I
focus
know.
on his glories.
but honoring Prahlad Maharaj is honoring Narasimhadev, and you're the servant of Prahlad Maharaj. So devotees can turn this around all the time. I just wanted to, I was today during work, I was just kind of jotting some things that I think of when I think about Prabhuji. You know, I have a chance to see lots of patients with lots of different kind of mindsets. And I noticed that sometimes when people are in the material world are very accomplished, they tend to become very self-centered and, selfish. It's just part of, being in the material world, I guess. But my observation is that, Prabhuji has done the opposite. He's dedicated himself to enabling everybody to connect to the source of the ultimate reality, which is our scriptures and our spiritual tradition in a very selfless manner. So that's remarkable in this world, for somebody to be that accomplished, that well recognized, and yet still have the humility to understand that the importance of conveying this message to others. And then other thing that I found very inspiring whenever I read, this is the art of understanding scripture in my mind, is that, clearly Prabhuji has studied the scriptures in a very systematic and deliberate manner. But my observation whenever I read Gita daily or listen to your lectures is there's a great amount of sensitivity involved in connecting us to that source of our tradition. And I really appreciate that. There's a wonderful article by His Holiness Satsarup Das Goswami Maharaj in an old Back to Godhead called Facing Our Current Reality While Living with Our Spiritual Ideals. Beautiful title. Facing Our Current Reality While Living with Our Spiritual Ideals. So from what I've seen, whenever Prabhu explains something from our scriptures, there's always an inherent intention to somehow or other fan the spark of devotion in our lives. And I very much appreciate that the fundamental message of hope and encouragement that our scriptures give us continuously. And to have a vision from the scriptures that it applies not only to our spiritual life, but to our day-to-day worldly existence, that takes a lot of skill. That's the art of any enterprise. So thank you very much for explaining the deep, profound Brahmans in our tradition in such a sensitive, inspiring, practical, and thoughtful manner. His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhuji ki jai. The Gaur Premanandi.
Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjalishalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Grateful to be here with all of you today on the sacred occasion of Narasimha Chaturdasi. And I'll speak today three broad parts. First, I'll talk about some, you see in Narasimha, there are three primary characters. In fact, if you consider how, I'll be using this as a blackboard to write and draw certain things. So if we consider the longest story in Narasimha Leela is actually of the villain, that is Hiranyakashipu. Then after that, there is the story of, you could say, Some people call him the second hero or the first hero. That is Prahlad. And this is the shortest story is of Narasimha. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, this pastime is described from chapters 3 till chapter 10. And Prahlad enters practically in chapters 5, 6. And Narasimhadev enters toward the end of chapter 8. And of course, the Srimad Bhagavatam is only one of the places where this story is being described. So I'll focus on the theme of how this Narasimha Leela describes how bhakti goes beyond all stereotypes. What things should be like, what we think of as bhakti, what we think about as religion, as spirituality, as devotion. Bhakti goes beyond all of those. So look at them, this broad theme, and we see how the Lord expresses his love here in extraordinary ways, and so does the devotee. Who is expressing their love now? Okay. So in one sense, if we consider bhakti, there is a devotee here, there is the Lord here. The Lord is infinite, but we cannot depict infinity over here. We'll just depict a larger circle. So the devotee is offering service to the Lord, and the Lord is reciprocating by offering mercy. And everything else is just incidental in one sense. So Hiranyakashipu, in this particular case, he is the most prominent character, as he's described for such a long time in the Bhagavatam. And yet, it is Hiranyakashipu never occupies a prominent place in Prahlad's consciousness. So for a devotee, even this world is an arena for expressing love to the Lord. And we'll see how in this reciprocation of love, ultimately the stereotype that is destroyed. That there is any reality greater than love for Krishna. That idea is completely destroyed by this pastime. Love for Krishna, that is clearly no. The highest reality is love for Krishna. Krishna's love for us and our love for Krishna. That is the highest reality. Now, generally, when we think about reality, when Hiranyakashipu gained power, so different people gain different degrees of powers. In the Bhagavatam start this pastime from a very fascinating point. It's asked, Yudhishthira is asking Narad Muni, is the Lord equal to everyone? And if he's equal, then why does he kill the demons? Why does he favor the devotees? And that's a fair enough question. But the answer to that question is told through this pastime. Now, there are different people with different degrees of powers. Hiranyakashipu seeks the highest level of power. And generally, when we hear these stories, there's both Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhaktivinoda Thakur means Krishna Samhita, Chaitanya Shikshamrita, and before that, Madhvacharya, in his Brahma Sutra Bhashya, he talks about how these stories can be approached at different levels. So what I'll present is a combination of what they say. If we say at one level, somebody may take the story literally. This is what happened. And that's all that there is to it. And yes, even if somebody takes the story literally, that can lead to two things. At one level, there is some entertainment. For many people, this is a pious form of entertainment. Oh, nice stories, enjoyable stories. And of course, because story of the Lord, so there is some purification. Beyond that, Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains that these stories can be understood at a higher level. You could call that as an ethical level. At the ethical level, we look not just at the stories, but also at what the characters represent. So, for example, in Ramayana, we're not just concerned about who is Ravan, but also what is Ravan. What is the mentality that Ravan represents? And by this, while any way we approach the Lord, there is purification. But if we apply it approach the Lord's pastime from ethical perspective, there is also edification. Edification means we get moral education. We get instruction about how to live, how different characters acted in different ways, and how we can learn to act. And by this, also there is purification. But in one sense, when we learn the pastimes from this perspective, then it is not just that while hearing the Leela, we are purified. But after hearing the Leela also, we have learned some principles. And as we apply those principles in our life, then there is further purification. Now, some people say this literal level is just, how can you be so foolish as to believe stories like this? That is a half man, half lion. Well, the same people who say, how can there be a half man, half lion? No, they will watch movies with half man, half spider. Half man and half bat. And there's half man and half ant, and so many things are there nowadays. So the idea is that attraction to the supernatural is natural within the human heart. And we can say this is just fictional, but the attraction to the fictional is there because there's a higher reality. But at the literal level, somebody might just rationally say, how can you believe these things? So Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, okay, if you think literal is simplistic, you can look at ethical level, at higher level. But then he says, but don't think that all the Vaishnavas, all the devotees who are approaching these pastimes are simply what they call as naive literalists, or just take everything literally. He says these pastimes can also be approached at a transcendental level. Transcendental level means here we see them as simply expressions of divine love, reciprocations of divine love. And at this level, the result of this is love and ecstasy. It's not just, it's also purification, but the culmination of purification is the development of pure love. And through that, there is ecstasy. So those who like to look for symbolic meanings, he says, oh, that's okay. You're intelligent enough to look at that. That there's something beyond that also. So now Srila Prabhupada, in his explanation of the pastimes, incorporates various levels. In fact, at a different time, he speaks at different levels. He says, somebody says, Kurukshetra is just symbolic. He says, no, Kurukshetra is a place. The Bhagavad Gita was spoken at a historical place. The Mahabharata is a historical event. But then, Srila Prabhupada also talks from the ethical perspective. Prabhupada says, just as Arjuna, as soon as he took the instruction of Krishna, his discouragement went away. And similarly, our body is like a chariot. If we take the instruction of Krishna, we will also be elevated. And then he also says that actually, this whole pastime is simply a Leela of the Lord. Arjuna was not confused. Arjuna was put into confusion by the Lord for the world's benefit, for the Gita to be spoken. So, if this seems too confusing, don't worry. It will only become more confusing. So, the point I have been discussing this is that we look at all three levels, but briefly. See, at a literal level, there are some things which are remarkably dissimilar. So, for example, the forms. The form of, say, Ravan has 10 heads, or here, Narasimha, there's half man, half lion. The forms are different, and sometimes the abilities are also different. Hiranyakashipu can perform extraordinary austerities. That's different. But beyond that, there is something similar. And what is it similar? That these characters, Hiranyakashipu might be a demon and Prahlad might be a small child, but they have desires and aspirations just like we have. And they also have to make decisions. And the principle is their choices also have consequences. So in general, this is what is the focus of the acharyas, that across the universe, there may be different kinds of people, but they all have a similar heart. Ultimately, the soul that beats within every heart is very simple. It's all a part of Krishna. And everybody has to choose responsibly. So it is this that we learn when we study scriptures, when we approach from an ethical perspective. So we'll look at one choice of Hiranyakashipu and one choice of Prahlad, and then we'll talk about the reciprocation of the Lord toward the end. As I said, the pastime is quite long, but we'll focus on one point. Now, whenever there are conflicts among people, different conflicts can be resolved in different ways. So, for some people, the only way to solve a conflict. One time I was trying to do mediation between two people. And the first person said that, let's meet in the middle. No, I'll admit that I made some mistakes. You admit that you made some mistakes. And we'll meet in the middle and resolve. Second person said, yes, I'm happy to meet you in the middle. I'm happy to admit that you made some mistakes. Now, that is not meeting in the middle. That is leaving the other person dangling in the middle. Some people don't think that if some problem is there, they have to change themselves. So they think the solution to all problems. See, whenever there is a problem, broadly, there could be two solutions. Many, but broadly, one is a solution based on virtue. I contemplate what is right and wrong. Maybe I did something wrong, and maybe I need to improve. But the other solution is based on power. That means, I was just not powerful enough to get the right result. If only I had more power, then I could fix all problems. Or I would make sure that I had no problems at all. So when Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha, both of them were terrorizing the universe, extremely tyrannical brothers. So they were the dreadful duo, and Hiranyaksha was killed by whom? Prahadev. Now everybody, when things happen, they give their own spin to the story. So the spin that Hiranyakashipu gave to this was, Vishnu is such a cunning trickster that he killed my glorious brother by appearing in a beastly form. Now they had a fair fight, and Hiranyakashipu was defeated fair and square by Varahadev. But still he said, Vishnu tricked him. He said, what is the solution? He said, if you have to win, I have to kill Vishnu. And the way to kill Vishnu is that I have to decrease his power and increase my power. So this is the materialistic mentality. The solution to every problem is that it's in terms of power. Just grab more power. Because of course, sometimes power is required for solving problems. But if that is the only solution that a person has, whenever there is an argument, the only solution is you raise your voice till the other person shuts down. That won't work for very long. So what Hiranyakashipu thinks is, he thinks that Vishnu is right now more powerful than me. So what I am going to do is, I am going to decrease Vishnu's power and increase my power. And how does he plan to do that? He tells all the demons that you go and destroy the Yajnasthalis, persecute the Brahmanas, stop all holy activities. And he thinks by this, Vishnu will become weak. Vishnu is not nourished by any of these things. In fact, he nourishes everyone through these things. Generally, the materialistic mentality is that they always get the cause effect wrong. That now it is the Lord Vishnu is the root of the tree of material existence. Everything is sustained by him. But I think if I destroy dharma, then Vishnu will become weak. But then the more other things is, I will perform austerity. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about three things. There is Gya, there is Jnana, Gya. Jnana is knowledge. Gya is object of knowledge. And Jnana Gamya. Jnana Gamya is objective of knowledge. There is knowledge. There is object of knowledge. Knowledge means you could say the knowledge of so many subjects. So, for example, somebody is into science. Okay, the scientific knowledge. What is the object of knowledge? Maybe they are civil engineers, so they study structures, buildings. Now, what is the objective of knowledge? Now, their objective of knowledge could be to make money, could be to serve society. If their objective is to make money, then they will make bridges that they make a lot of money, but then people don't get saved. So the object of knowledge and objective of knowledge are two different things. So Hiranyakashipu, sometimes we say he's spiritually ignorant. No, he's not spiritually ignorant. Actually, to say call him ignorant is to praise him too much. He's not ignorant. He's ignorant about the purpose of spiritual knowledge. So he says, actually, to gain power enough to defeat Vishnu, it's a very difficult task. But no problem. The soul is eternal. Therefore, even if I die, in the next lifetime, I'll come back and I'll perform austerity. I'll keep performing austerity till one day I become strong enough to kill Vishnu. So finally, he performed austerity and then he gains power. And when he gains power, he thinks he has tricked Brahmaji. Yes. Brahmaji says, I cannot give you immortality. He says, he tricks Brahmaji into thinking that I have got mortality. I won't die inside, outside, not on the ground, not in the air, not in the daytime, nor at night time, not by any weapon, not by anything animate or any inanimate, not by any being created by you or any devatas. He said so many conditions. He thinks that he has got what he wanted. So for him, this is the extreme contrast. Hiranyakashipu ascends to the peak of power. He becomes so powerful that that when he would just raise his eyebrows, even the devatas would tremble in fear. Contrasted with him. Where if you can also consider Hiranyakashipu is the embodiment of the highest power that a person can dream of. Or we consider a person can't even dream of. Now, how many of us can think that I'll raise my eyebrows? We have AI and so much machine technology. How many of us think I'll just raise my eyebrows and the rains will stop? Or the wind will start blowing. That is just beyond people's imagination. He had that much power. And contrast that with the other character. So the Bhagavatam is demonstrating this pastime, how material calculations are completely inadequate. So if you consider Hiranyakashipu is the embodiment of not just power, but you could say almost supreme power materially. Materially, he's got the highest power. And contrast him with Prahlad, he's the embodiment of, you could say, powerlessness. Again, materially speaking. Prahlad is just a small child, a 5-year-old boy. And generally, although he's born in a Kshatriya family, Prahlad is never shown wielding weapons. Prahlad is just a small, helpless boy. He's in his own home, and in his home, he is expected to be protected by his parents. He is the opposite of Hiranyakashipu, not just in character, which we'll come to, but here in terms of power. And then he is just naturally devoted to the Lord. Sometimes, if you look at the conversation that happens with Prahlad and Hiranyakashipu, now there are 3 times they have conversations. First, each time Prahlad speaks about bhakti, and first time Hiranyakashipu is upset, and he says, "Okay," he tells that my spies have got this. Vishnu spies have got me in a kingdom. Tell Chanda and Amarka, be careful. Don't let them contaminate my son. Second time, again when Prahlad glorifies Vishnu, what did he learn in school? And he learned about the glories of Vishnu. He says, my son has become a traitor, and therefore he deserves to be killed. Now his son is no threat to him at all. He's just a 5-year-old boy. So why did Hiranyakashipu get so angry that he wanted to kill his own son? Now, Prahlad, he could say that, okay, he was contaminating the other kids. Okay, but the kids were not raising weapons to fight against them. See, the nature of power is that it cannot tolerate opposition. And that is the sign of a tyrant. When some people say that, a boss may say, oh, in a meeting, all of you are perfectly free to express your opinion, as long as you agree with me. There's no meeting over there. It's just an imposition. So Krishna, although he is God, he does not impose his opinion on others. He's given everyone free will and lets people choose. Now, of course, actions have consequences, but Krishna is not controlling the free will. But it was not that Prahlad was a threat to his security. It is Prahlad was a threat to his sense of complete power. And that's why he tried to crush him. He tried to kill him multiple times. And when all the attempts failed, now when those attempts failed, I'll come back to this point of how the Lord protected Prahlad. But let's look from Hiranyakashipu's perspective at this point. And finally, he was so dejected. He didn't know what to do. And Chanda and Amarka said, don't worry, we will take you and we'll educate him. But then Prahlad, now his devotion had gone through the fire of tribulation and it blazed forth even more. And this time when he spoke about bhakti to his friends, they all became fearlessly devoted. And then Chanda and Amarka said that, this boy cannot be controlled. And earlier, even Hiranyakashipu, everybody has some boundaries in their life. A person may be a terrible person, but no matter how terrible they are, there are some terrible things that they won't do. Criminals, somebody will say, okay, I might be a criminal, I might rob, but I'm not going to kill someone. I might kill, but I'm not going to kill children. Whatever, everybody has boundaries. So even Hiranyakashipu, initially, he didn't want to do the act of killing his own son. That's why he deputed it to others. He said, others try to kill him. When he became too defiant, he decided, and I'm not only going to kill Prahlad, but before that, I'm going to kill his faith. And that is why he asked, you say there is this Vishnu, you keep glorifying him. Where is he? Is he there in this pillar? And the point why he asked this question was he wanted to show that there is no Vishnu in this pillar and you are wrong. So his point was not just to crush Prahlad, but to crush Prahlad's faith. Now he had his plan and Krishna had his plan. So when Prahlad said, so Narasimha Purana described the story slightly differently. So he says that when he asks, so is he everywhere? Is he in this pillar? So Prahlad replies, he was everywhere. He is everywhere. He will be everywhere. There is no place where the Lord does not exist. Now, before this happens, there is one significant point. that Prahlad asks, and Prahlad asks by Hiranyakashipu, as I said, he wanted to destroy his spirit. But where does he get that idea from? First he says, oh, the whole universe trembles in fear. And I raise my eyebrows. And you are not afraid of me. He says, by whose power have you become so fearless? So he senses that there's something. Right now there's a war going on. It's a war between Ukraine and Russia, but it's not a war. It's not a Ukraine standing up to Russia. Ukraine has America behind it. So by whose power are you fighting? So now, when he's asked this question, the answer that Prahlad gives seems to be designed to not just agitate, but infuriate Hiranyakashipu. What is the answer that he gives? He says that the source of my power is the same as the source of your power. In fact, it's the source of your power. Now, when he's saying this, what does he mean? He is telling, you think you are so proud of your power, but actually your power is not your power. Your power is coming from someone else. So, at one level, if this can seem very disrespectful. Suppose somebody gives a beautiful class, or somebody does wonderful kirtan, and after that we're talking with them, and the first thing we tell them, all ability comes from Krishna. So what do we say? You're not just a great speaker, you're not a great singer. So it's almost like putting down the other person. So now a devotee will not get offended. You will say, thank you for reminding me. Why is Prahlad doing this? Why is he almost like putting fuel on fire? Actually, this is where Prahlad is not actually agitating, he's educating. See, there are two conceptions of God. One is that God is the best of all beings. The best of all beings means what? There are many beings in this world. So some beings may have little power, some beings may have some more power, some beings may have more powers. And among them, God is the being with the greatest power. So God is the best of all beings. Now, while this conception is mentioned sometimes in scripture, this often creates a competitive conception. That means it's like a tennis player's array in which one player is number one. But tomorrow, if another player keeps becoming stronger and stronger and stronger, then that other player can overthrow the first player. And then the other player can become number one. So we say God is the best of all beings. That means, yes, there are many beings, God is the best. But if other beings gain power, then one day, all these other beings any of these other beings can also become God. So Hiranyakashipu has this conception that yes, Vishnu is the most powerful, but he's just one among us. And I will one day become as powerful, if not more powerful than Vishnu. But the other conception is that God is the basis of all being. That means that whoever has any power, this is a limited conception. This is the more accurate conception. Whoever has any power, all that power comes from Krishna. So I'll explain this. What this means is, if we consider this is the level where all beings exist. And this is the level where God exists. Now there can be various beings of different levels of power. But even the most powerful being, they can never reach God. God exists in a different category. And not only does he exist in a different category, he actually sustains everyone. Whatever power anyone has, that comes from Krishna. So Prahlad, what he's telling Hiranyakashipu is, don't think that Vishnu is your competitor. He says, he's out of your league. Don't play in your league. But what he's telling is, the only reason why you think Vishnu is your enemy is because you have let your mind become your enemy. To the extent our mind is our enemy, to that extent we think of God as our enemy. And most of us, we're not thinking that God is our enemy. But we often think that why doesn't God do better? We tell our children, we should do better in life. So we will not tell like that to God, but God should do better. I have worked so hard. I should achieve this. I should achieve that. Now, when we think that God is not doing well enough, then we do the ultimate thing. So I am God. When I was 15, when I first heard this philosophy, that you are God. As soon as I heard this, I thought, if I am God, then the world is in big trouble. I can't manage my own life. If I manage the whole world, I'm in big trouble. The idea is, when Prahlad is speaking this, he's telling him, why are you seeing Vishnu as your competitor? He's your benefactor. Whatever you have is coming from him. And he wants to give the best to you. The Lord, he wants to give himself to the devotee. Just like when Hanuman came back after finding Sita, Lord Ramachandra, he said, you have done such service. I have nothing to offer to you. I'm a prince in exile. The only thing I can offer you is my embrace. And the commentators explain that the Lord's form is the abode of the goddess of fortune. So when Lord Ram offered him that embrace, the Lord offered him everything. So Prahlad is telling Hiranyakashipu that the Lord will give you everything. The Lord will give you more than what you can imagine. Why are you treating him as a competitor? So he was not being agitative, provocative. He was just trying to be educative. But Hiranyakashipu did not take it that way. So he tried to destroy the pillar. And then from there, suddenly, now Hiranyakashipu is a trained fighter. He's a cold-blooded fighter. And fighters are trained not to show any fear. And yet, when he smashed that pillar, from that such a blood-curdling roar came out. And even Hiranyakashipu sometimes just closed his eyes. Just couldn't bear it. What is this sound? And finally, he had to force himself to open his eyes. And then he saw, Stambhe sabhayam namrugam namasham. He says, Adrishtapurvam. He says, the form that had never been seen before. And that form was gigantic. The form was so much towering that as that form moved his head, the clouds overhead seemed to be scattering away. And that was Shri Narasimha Bhagavan Ki Jai. So when Lord Narasimha appeared, now Hiranyakashipu said, who is this being? What is this creature? Now, although he wanted to prove that there's no Vishnu, now he didn't initially recognize this Vishnu because this was nothing like Vishnu. This is a completely different being. Adrishta. Now nobody had seen him before. But then, as he clearly saw this being is a threat to me. And he tried to attack, he tried to fight. Now Lord Narasimha was playing with him. And he was playing. Now he was thinking, now he was attacking and he was dodging and he was skipping and he was slipping away. And each time he was slipping away, he was thinking, yeah, this creature looks big, but it's not very powerful. He was gaining his own confidence. But he thought he was winning, but the Lord was winning. Now, when each time Hiranyakashipu would come to attack Lord Narasimha, and then he would get away from it, the Devatas were watching above. They started getting alarmed. What happened? What happened? They said, this Hiranyakashipu was a terrible demon. And they were thinking, is he going to kill Narasimha? They could say this was Vishnu. But all the devatas have faith in Vishnu's prowess. But their faith is always shaky. Because their faith is conditional. Their faith is based on the Lord will protect our heavenly opulence. And because of that, is he powerful? Although they have faith, but still they are also doing power calculation. Is he powerful enough? Is he not powerful enough? And each time he would slip, they would be shaken. No, that's just because things are not going the way we want. Does not mean that things are not going the way they should be going. Sometimes we think just because they're two different things. So the Lord was having his own plan. Things are not going the way we want. We become alarmed. What's happening? Why is this not working? But even then, things are going the way they should. So the Lord was having his own plan. Satyam vidhatum nijavritya bhavashitam. To make sure that the word of his devotee was proven true. And that's why when the Lord appeared, he was fighting Hiranyakashipu till the right time came. Time? It's dusk. He was waiting. Hiranyakashipu was thinking, yeah, I am winning. And then what was happening was Hiranyakashipu was attacking and moving in this direction and moving in the direction. And he was thinking that this creature, I am getting him where I want. I am getting him to move here, move there, move there. He was thinking that he was moving Lord Vishnu, but Lord Vishnu was moving him. And just at the time of twilight, Lord Vishnu got Hiranyakashipu where he wanted. It was not that he had to take Hiranyakashipu there. Just got Hiranyakashipu there. Where did he get him? At the doorstep. The condition was not inside, not outside. So then, as soon as the Lord caught Hiranyakashipu, and the Lord could have just killed him immediately, but he got him on his lap and placed him on his lap and held him down over there. And that was the time when Hiranyakashipu realized it's game over for me. I am defeated. So the very thing that he wanted to do to Prahlad, he wanted to crush Prahlad's spirit. And that was what was done to him by Lord Narasimha. He was overpowered, and for him, that being overpowered was in one sense more painful than death. And after he had been overpowered, after he had clear idea that I am overpowered, I'm defeated, I'm going to die, then Lord Narasimha performed the original stomach surgery. It was operation successful, patient liberated. So when Hiranyakashipu was killed, then everyone breathed a big sigh of relief. And the Devatas started coming and they started offering prayers. But the Lord was unmoved by those prayers. He was still furious. And why was he furious? Because earlier his anger was towards Hiranyakashipu. See, now the love can be expressed in many ways. And one of the expressions of love is anger. Sometimes we think, I have to control my anger. I have to get rid of my anger. Well, yes and no. It is that anger is something which we need to not be controlled by. But that does not mean anger itself is a bad thing. Because anger indicates that something is wrong. Something is wrong, something is seriously wrong about something that is seriously important for us. Now, our assessment might be wrong, our evaluation might be wrong, but Anger is in that sense a very powerful messenger. At the very least, anger indicates that we care. When do we get angry about something? When we care about it. And if a person doesn't care for anything at all, then what are they living for? If we are passing by a school area and we see some big bully terrorizing some small child, and if we just nonchalantly walk by, we don't feel upset, we don't feel angry. Then, when something is wrong outside, and if we don't feel angry, then something is wrong inside, isn't it? Anger is itself not a bad thing. Acting angrily is often a bad thing. The emotion of anger is not a bad thing. The expression of anger is usually bad. So anger can be an expression of love. One devotee told me recently about his spiritual master. He said when his spiritual master would get angry, he would sometimes speak very strongly to his disciples. But when he would get extremely angry, he would just not speak anything. And he said his disappointment was actually more painful than his anger. That means if somebody has done something wrong and we don't get angry with that person, then that means it's almost like we have lost hope with that person. And that means you stopped caring. So the Lord's anger is his expression of love. So first his anger was towards Hiranyakashipu. How dare you threaten my devotee like this? But then when the Devatas were trying to pacify him, Lord Narasimha's anger was even towards the Devatas. Why? Because he said, you didn't protect Prahlad when he was being troubled. You neither protected him, nor did you even protest. There's nothing. And now you're coming and offering prayers to me. Offering prayers to me is all empty. It's not going to pacify me. But then Prahlad came forward. And Prahlad offered prayers. And that same Lord, who was the scariest of scary beings initially, that Lord was a fierce lion. Suddenly he changed into a sweet cat. And he picked up Prahlad and blessed him with his hands. Put his hand on his head. And then Prahlad started offering prayers. Brahmadaya Surgana Munayotha Siddhi. This is like the championship moment for Prahlad. Not only has he survived the tyranny of Hiranyakashipu, not only has he maintained his faith, now he has been proven to be more powerful than all this illustrious galaxy of devatas. And what does Prahlad say? He says, my dear Lord, they're all much more qualified than me. And if they cannot satisfy you, what hope is there for me to satisfy you? Then he says, my dear Lord, you are not satisfied by anything material. In fact, you don't need anyone to satisfy you. Because Naivatmana Prabhu Nijalabha Purno, you are self-satisfied. But when anybody glorifies you, you accept their glorification for that person's purification. And therefore, Tasmadaham Vigata Viklava Ishwarasya. Therefore, I'll give up all hesitation. I will not contemplate my disqualification. I'll glorify you for my purification. And then he says, my dear Lord, I am not afraid of you. He describes, it's one of the most, you can say, scarily beautiful description of the Lord. He is standing right in front of the Lord and he's describing him. Naham bibhemya, I'm not afraid of you. Ajitate ati bhayanakasya. He's acknowledging this is bhayanak, this is scary. So it's ironic, this is scary, but I'm not afraid. Ati bhayanakasya. And how do you describe the form? Jivvarka netra bhukuti rabhaso gradamstrad. His jivha, his tongue is just moving like a sword. It's racing, lashing around, lolling around, and that itself is scary. He's a lion after all. But he says, I'm not afraid of you now. Arkanitra. Now, sometimes when somebody is angry, no, if we have done something actually wrong and the other person is angry with us, then we look for anywhere to look at except the person's eyes, isn't it? And here the Lord is so angry, his eyes are like a blazing sun, Arkanetra. And not only that, Bhukuti Rabhaso Gradamshtrat, the Lord is frowning. He is enraged. Now he has become pacified with Prahlad now in front of him. But Prahlad is here describing the form as it was just a few minutes before. And when Prahlad approached, Bhukuti is frowning. And then Rabhaso Gradamshtrat. Damshtra is teeth. His teeth are tough and they're fierce. They're coming out of his mouth like a typical lion's teeth. And I'm not afraid of death. Then he says, Antra Sraja Kshataja Kekeshara Shanku Karana. Antra Sraja. Now he is wearing a garland of intestines. Now this can, among all ghastly things, this can seem the most ghastly. Somebody, they wear a garland of intestines. What kind of person is this? But the Acharya described, why does the Lord put a garland? See, as I said, the Lord is angry with Hiranyakashipu, but ultimately, this is simply a reciprocation of love. So for Prahlad, Lord Vishnu, Lord Narasimha Dev is the ultimate reality. And Hiranyakashipu is just like an incidental reality. And for Narasimha Dev, Prahlad is the main reality. He's protecting Prahlad. So when Hiranyakashipu is a threat, he neutralizes that threat. But then, after he has killed him, he thinks Narasimha Dev is still remembering Prahlad. And then as he reaches into his intestine, he says, it is from this body that a devotee like Prahlad came. So he takes the intestine and he feels the intestine. Is there another Prahlad over here? And when he sees there is no Prahlad, he says, this intestine is so glorious that my devotee Prahlad came from this. And that is why for that intestine, he gives a place on his own sacred form. So what can seem to be a sign of brutality, putting somebody's intestine around one's neck, is actually a sign of deep love. Antras Raja. So Prahlad is not afraid on seeing this garland of intestines. Shatajakeshara Shanku Karnan. Shatajakeshara. Some people, they will be all rough and tough, but little sight of blood, that completely unnerves them. Now there is blood all over the hair of Hiranyakashipu. He's fighting with the hair of Narasimha Dev. He's fighting with Hiranyakashipu and he killed him, but the blood flew. So Kshatajakeshara, there's blood on all these places. But he says, I'm not afraid of it. Shanku Karanan. Some people, everything about them is stern. If you look at their ears also like thin and pointed. And you feel scared by looking at their ears. This person was a stern person. There's one branch of paranormal science, like say people look at their handwritings and they determine their character. You look at people's palm and determine their character. So there is an African science, you can call it science. It looks at the shape of people's ears and determines their character. Now, how much you can determine, you don't know. But the idea is Shanku Karanan. And then finally says Nirra, the bee, the digibhad, Aribhinna Khagrat. He says, now, as if all this is not scary enough, you roar so fearsomely that as soon as they hear the roars, even giant elephants run away in fear. So normally a roar is like a challenge. Elephants and lions are opponents. Now opponents don't run away, but Nirra, the bee, the digibhad, and then Aribin Nakhagrat. And he finally remembers the weapon that actually killed Aribin. The nails just rip apart the opponents. So he's saying, I'm seeing all this, but I'm not afraid of any of this. Because Prahlad's vision is the vision of love. He's not seeing the anger of the Lord, he's seeing the love behind the anger. And that's why for him he finds Ruchira. He says, this is such a sweet form of the Lord. He says, Kshemaya cha hitaya cha. This form is for the benefit of the world, for the welfare of the world. His prayers, they're among the longer prayers in the Bhagavatam, but his prayer starts from humility, then it goes to glorification, then it goes through description of the nature of the world, nature of the Lord, and then finally it goes to compassion. And then what he says is, he says, my father had everything and yet he was never happy. And when he says, my dear Lord, I look at people around. Prahlad lived in a demoniac community. And he saw everybody pursuing sensual pleasure. What does Prahlad say that? So he says, as the devotee, I am relishing the nectar of your glories. And when I see this, and those who are non-devotees, what are they doing? They are Maya Sukhaya Bharam Udvahato Vimudhan. They are chasing after tiny drops of pleasure in this material world. And he uses the word Mudhan. Mudha is what? Fool. Mudha is empowered fool. People are very powerfully seeking material pleasures. But he says, even if they get it, it's so tiny, it's so insignificant. He says, my father had more material pleasure than anybody could dream of. And yet he was never satisfied. He says, my dear Lord, I only want to deliver all these people who are chasing after these tiny flickering drops of pleasure. He says, please make me an instrument of your compassion. And then when he finishes, the Lord is so pleased. The Lord asks him, Prahlad, you have pleased me like no one before. Ask me for something. I want to do something for you. And then Prahlad says, my dear Lord, you don't tempt me, please. He says, he's telling the Lord, don't tempt me. You know, the world is full of temptations. I came to you to be protected from temptations. Now, if you tempt me, where will I go? But the Lord says, oh, I want to do something for you. Ask. And then he says, my dear Lord, to akamas tvad bhaktas tam cha swamyana pashraya. He says, I am your servant unconditionally. You are my Lord eternally. He says, in your devotion is my supreme satisfaction. Apart from this, I seek no other relation. So he says, this is all that I want. And if at all you want, but still the Lord is saying, something, Prahlad. He says, I want to fulfill your desire. And he says, okay, my dear Lord, then you can fulfill this one desire of mine, that my heart be free from all desire. The Lord is both pleased and vexed by it. And he said, but I want to do something for you. And then he says that, okay, please forgive my father. I know that he offended you. I know that he blasphemed you, but please forgive him. And the Lord is so pleased. He says he's already forgiven. And he says, Trisapta Pita Puta. He says, 21 generations of those who are devoted to me are delivered already. Now, when he says this, when Prahlad asks, let him be forgiven. This is extraordinary prayer. In the Christian tradition, when Jesus being crucified, it says that, forgive them for they know not what they do. That's considered a very exalted level of compassion. And it is. And yet, those were strangers. They were just those people who were crucifying him. They're just following the orders of the Roman judge, Pontius Pilate. But here, generally if a stranger attacks us, that is painful. Anybody attacking us is painful. But if a trusted person, That person attacks us. That person backstabs us. Somebody who thinks will protect us attacks us. That's much more painful. And to forgive that is much more difficult. And what to speak, not just forgive that, but to ask for forgiveness on behalf of that person. That is even more difficult. It's Prahlad exhibits such a saintly level of compassion. And then the Lord tells him that, he says, Bhogena punyam kushalena papam. He says, you don't want anything, Prahlad? That is what makes you qualified to get everything. Ultimately, Krishna, all the resources in the material world, Krishna wants to give them to someone. And who is better than a devotee to have those things? Because devotees will use them for the purpose of service. Others may use them for their own selfish purposes. So he says, you take the entire kingdom and you rule virtuously. You remember me and you serve me. And this is where the Lord blesses Prahlad once again. And then he departs. And here Prahlad's humility comes in. When the Lord departs, what does Prahlad first do? No, not that I'm going to sit on the throne now. As soon as he has offered his prayers to the Lord, he turns and then offers his prayers to the Devatas. He worships and respects the Devatas. And then they enthrone him as the king and they bless him. And with their blessings, then he reigns the kingdom for a long, long time to come. And Prahlad's devotion is extraordinary, not just because he was protected by the Lord. Yes, the physical protection is extraordinary. But more than that, what is extraordinary is that he never deviated from the Lord. He is the embodiment of Smaranam as a mode of devotional service. That he's not the example of Rakshanam, protected him. But what makes Prahlad Maharaj special is not that the Lord protected him, but that he always remembered the Lord. In temptation, in tribulation, in threat, in prosperity, always he was fixed in his devotion to the Lord. And you see, Srila Prabhupada was also like that. Now, Prabhupada may not have faced a demon like Hiranyakashipu. But when Srila Prabhupada was trying to share Krishna Bhakti, he faced obstacles. Nobody seemed to be interested. Whether it was, he was trying for 30, 40 years in India, but nobody seemed to be interested in practicing Bhakti at that time. And he had no idea of the West. He had not even gone out of India till then. Normally, when people grow older. If you ask a small child, who do you want to be? I want to be an airline pilot. I want to be the next baseball star. I want to be the next cricket star. I want to be the next Hollywood star. I want to be the president of America. People have big ambitions. But as they face the reality and sometimes the cruelty of life, their ambitions get beaten down. The same person who said, I want to become the president of America. By the time they graduate, it'll be good if I get a job. Life beats down our ambitions. Now, Srila Prabhupada, time and time again, he faced setbacks. Almost like that things seemed to be working. But what happened? Prabhupada's ambitions didn't become smaller. They became bigger. Nothing was working in India. Prabhupada said, let me go to America. And that too at the age of 70. In one sense, everything was arrayed against Prahlad. Now, Prahlad could have been worrying. No, Hiranyakashipu has all these blessings. How could anyone ever be able to kill Hiranyakashipu? But Prahlad didn't worry about that. So Prabhupada could have said, in fact, that's what Sunti Maharaj she is a sponsor. And she told, my secretary is telling me, Swamiji, you are so old. America is so cold. How will you survive there? But Prabhupada was determined. Prabhupada had nothing going in favor of him. In fact, everything was arrayed against him. He had no money. He had no institutional support. He had no contacts. He had no followers. Even the contacts were very sketchy. And even when he came to America, Things seem to just going again and again against him. The very person who was supposed to become his first disciple, he went on a drug-induced mania and he attacked Srila Prabhupada. So everything was arrayed against him. But Prabhupada was fixed in his remembrance of Krishna. Prabhupada was fixed in his service to Krishna. Prabhupada had that faith. Ache kichu karya tabe anumane. My dear Lord, you must have some plan for me. That's why you have brought me here. And just as Narasimha appeared in his own extraordinary way and delivered Prahlad, in the last 10 years of Srila Prabhupada's life, Prabhupada was just, throughout his life, he was doing Krishna Katha, he was doing Krishna Kirtan. But Prabhupada, at the right time, Krishna brought him to the right place, the place where there's a counterculture, people were exploring spirituality. And then one devotee has written a book called the Hare Krishna Explosion. It just spread. It was Lord Narasimha's mercy, it was Krishna's mercy, it was Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy. How the movement spread. So just as Prahlad was absorbed in the remembrance of the Lord, Prabhupada was absorbed in the remembrance of the Lord. Now Prahlad in his situation, his surrender was in one way. He was just sitting and remembering the Lord. He was just small and powerless. There's nothing that he could do. He said, okay, my dear Lord, I just depend on you. In general, in our life, there are some things in our control, and there are many which are out of our control. So our surrender to the Lord, it comes in many different ways. Prahlad embodies when there are things out of our control. How do we surrender? We surrender through dependence. Just remember the Lord. Just become absorbed in the remembrance of the Lord. Now, Srila Prabhupada, he was also surrendered to the Lord. But his surrender, he was not just sitting in Vrindavan remembering the Lord. The mood was the same, but the method was different. The method was, Prabhupada was trying this, trying that. He's going to this place. If this place didn't work, try that place. Try this. If this doesn't work, try that. He was trying so many things. And his surrender was through diligence. Diligence means responsibility, commitment, dedication. Keep trying, be resourceful. This doesn't work, this works. So his surrender was for what is in our control. We need to be diligent. We need to do the very best that we can. If we have to cook for Krishna, and we can't say I depend on Krishna. All the ingredients will automatically mix themselves and everything will be nice. No, we have to be diligent. So Prabhupada's surrender was primarily through his diligence. But the principle was the same. And Prabhupada was also blessed immensely by Krishna, just as Prahlad was blessed. So what this pastime ultimately tells us is that things will be okay in the end. As the Bhagavad Gita says, Yatra Yogeshwara Krishno Partho Dhanurdara Tatra Shri Vijayo Bhutir Nirvani Tirma Tirmama. And if things are not okay, it is not yet the end. The movie is still going on, it's not over. So sometimes we might just check out of the movie of our life. We just say, oh, it's all hopeless. No, just as Prahlad never lost hope, Prabhupada never lost hope. On this Chaturdasi, we can pray to Narasimha, to Prahlad, to Srila Prabhupada, that we all can maintain our devotion and continue our service in whatever way is possible for us in our particular situation, and that we may get their mercy as per the Lord's plan. Shri Narasimha Bhagwan ki. So I'll quickly summarize. I discussed 3 main points. I first talked about how Hiranyakashipu saw everything in terms of power. That his demoniac mentality was, as first said, that we're looking at this pastime from an ethical perspective, not just literal, not just ethical, not transcendental, but ethical, so that we can learn values that can help us remember the Lord. So his power is sometimes required to solve problems. But if power is the first or only thing we look at, then we are deluding ourselves. We need not just power, but what we need is virtue. And he never thought of, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the wrong thing? And Prahlad was the embodiment of exactly opposite, complete powerlessness. And yet he had the supreme power of devotion. And he was fearless. He was not being reckless. He simply wanted to educate the Lord, educate his brother, father, that the Lord is not the best of all beings. He's also, remember the word? Basis of all beings. That don't compete with him. He is your well-wisher. And the third point I discussed was Narasimha Dev's love. His anger, his anger towards Hiranyakashipu, his wearing the garland of Hiranyakashipu's intestine, his anger with the devatas, all that is an expression of his great love. And then last point we discussed was how the Lord's blessings come to those who wait, those who patiently and persistently wait. Just as Prahlad was blessed, just as Prabhupada was blessed. So we need persistence in our devotion, persistence in our surrender. Whether we surrender by dependence with respect to things that are not in our control, or by diligence with respect to things in our control, that persistence will ultimately be rewarded. Thank you very much. Shri Narasimha Chaturdasi Mahamahotsav ki, Shri Prahlad Maharaj ki, Shri Prabhupada ki, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande. We have time? I don't want to take too much. Yes, sir.
Hi Krishna Prabhuji, thank you for the amazing class as usual. Prabhu, I was thinking that, and this is a good topic to ask because mood of Prahlad is Smaran. When we leave, when our journey from the material world back to the spiritual world is a very long journey. We have so many distractions on the way. This world itself we think is so beautiful, and they say that the devatas come here to urinate, right? Like it's nothing. But on our way, it's so many beautiful, so many captivating things. So how can we like focus and have complete smaran on the Lord and not be deviated by anything else on our way? Is it only by sheer will? Like should we be very strong-willed?
Okay, so how can we avoid being distracted? Well, when I find the answer, I'll tell you. See, we cannot have unrealistic expectations from ourselves. The world is a place where, it's very rare that our journey towards Krishna will be straight. We will go like this, but still we'll keep going towards Krishna. So we get distracted. So rather than thinking that all the time we have to be consistent, we can try to be consistent, but even if we can't be, we can try to be resilient. Resilient means if we can be consistent, good, but if not, resilient means even if I go down, I'll rise up. So sometimes when we go down, we can rise up again, but we feel so guilty that we have gone down, that after we have gone down, we are beating ourselves and keeping ourselves down. No, okay, sometimes we got off, come back on track. So Krishna understands that this world is a distracting place. It says, the mind may stray away, but let it not stay away. We cannot stop it from straying away. That's just if we can stop it, great. But if we can't, it may stray away, but at least let it not stay away. So this we don't want. And that's what it goes away, comes back. And that's why if we have, now this straying away, we can also minimize it by two things, by association and by responsibility. Association is if we are surrounded by devotees as much as possible for us, or at least if not physically surrounded by devotees, at least we are accountable to devotees. Then if we are getting too off, devotees will warn us, devotees will remind us. And we can't just depend on external all the time. We take responsibility. So if we have services to do, even if we get distracted, okay, I got distracted, but I got things to do. I had to give this class, I had to do this seva, to get this done. And then even if we get distracted, don't for too long. So that way, so association is more external, our sense of responsibility is more internal. We do those two things, then we can counter the distraction and minimize it. Thank you. Yes.
Go to the second point that you had there. So thank you, Prabhuji, for the great lecture. So I'm very particular about the words that you choose. Like you are a very good orator, and your vocabulary is very great. So every time we talked about the best of the beings and the basis of the being, you use the word conceptual. You always said it's conceptualized it like this, or it's a concept. Like, why did you choose the word concept and not the fact? Because this is the fact. Concept would be like something which is abstract, right?
Okay. I think I use the word categorical. It's categorically different, but conceptualize. Okay, see, there is a reality. There's no doubt. As you can say, it's a fact or reality. But we have a conception of that reality. In that sense, it's a concept for us. So we may conceptualize God to be the best of all beings, or we may conceptualize God to be the basis of all being. So we could say, in one sense, what is truth? In the Mimamsa literature, truth is defined as the coincidence between conception and reality. When these become congruent, to the extent they become congruent, to that extent we are arriving at truth. So we don't have access to reality. We have access to only our conceptions. Because even whatever reality we perceive, it is through our mind and the conceptions of the mind that we have in the mind. Now, that does not mean our conceptions are false or the concepts themselves are false. The point is, our conception needs to be as aligned with reality as possible. So that's why I was saying God may be conceived in two different ways, as the basis of all being or as the best of all beings. The second concept is more aligned with reality. The first is also good. At least we think of God as the best of all beings, but it is an incomplete understanding. Okay.
Yeah, so it's like when you join the concept to the truth that you have, that's when it becomes the truth. I mean,
yeah, like somebody has cataract, then they see everything too. So what is happening is there is their perception and there's a conception formed in the mind, but their conception is not aligned with reality. Or somebody is in a desert, they're seeing a mirage. What is happening over there is the reality and their conception are not just here a mismatch, they are completely opposite. So we all have greater or lesser degree of alignment in our conception with reality. For example, we might see somebody and we might think, oh, this person seems to be a very, very grave and serious and scary person. But then we get to know them more and we say, they're not that, they're warm and nice. So then our conception changes. Has the person changed? Maybe, maybe not, but it's our. So there is alignment between what actually is and how we see it.
and how do we reach to that alignment, Prabhuji?
That happens through both greater familiarity and greater purity with respect to Krishna. Generally, with people, the more familiar we become, the more we understand them. But it's not just familiarity. Sometimes, if we have a particular agenda, we have a particular bias, then we just can't see the personalities. That's why familiarity is required. And we can get to know them more and more, but we also need more and more purity. And when we don't have any vested agenda, then we can see that person more clearly. Okay. Thank you. Yes, we had a question here.
Hare Krishna,
Oh,
Prabhuji.
okay.
Thank you for the wonderful speech. My only question was back to the Hiranyakashipu topic. Most of us know that Hiranyakashipu worshipped Brahma, and then Brahma gave him powers, but he used the powers for the long things. So instead of Narasimha killing Hiranyakashipu, why couldn't Brahma just take his powers back?
I wish you could take your question back. Say that it's a very good question. Within the system of the working of the universe, Brahma, while at one level he is considered to be a source of the blessings, but there is in one understanding, there is his free will. But another thing is that it is almost like his role. So it is his obligation. That means you can look at it two ways. Say, for example, if say in America, in some parts of the country, if you just go and give money, you can get a gun. Now you may have to get some permission, some license and all that, but you can get a gun. And the seller, whoever is it, if you give the money, if you have the permission, they have to give you the gun. Now maybe you may know something. Hey, this person is a dangerous person. This person likely to abuse the gun. Now, does the gun seller have the right to not give the gun? Well, that's where the gray territory comes. In one sense, you could say legally, according to, you have to give the gun. So, and after the gun is given, then what that person does, the gun seller cannot control that. So while Brahmaji gives the power, it is his power to give. But once the power is in his hands, but once it is given, he can't take it back. He doesn't have that power. Now now is he obliged? That's why towards the end of this pastime, before Narasimha goes back, he tells Brahmaji that these troublesome demons don't give blessings like this to them. So now there's no record in the Bhagavatam of Brahmaji giving the reply. When the Lord talks, you don't talk back to the Lord, isn't it? So the point is, yes, the devatas, in some ways, they are like office bearers. So it's a transactional relationship. Like if you go to a shopkeeper, or if you hire a cab. Now, if the cab says, "Oh, you belong to this country or you belong to this race, I want to drive you," that is discrimination. You cannot do that. You have to drive. So he said, in one sense, legally, he felt he was bound to give the blessings. But the Lord was telling him that don't have such a legalistic attitude. Yes, this demon, you already knew he was a dangerous demon. And just because he has performed austerity does not mean you have to give him that blessing. So that's the point, that he thought he was bound to give. And once he is given the power, he cannot take that power back. Thank you. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you for the wonderful class. I have two questions.
Oh, okay.
So the first question, my first question is that you said that Prahalad, when he was pacifying the Lord, he said, "I will if I heard it correctly, my glorification, I'm giving you glorification for
my purification."
Huh?
For my purification?
Oh, my purification. I think I heard it as my glorification.
For my glorification. Okay. Okay. I'll glorify you for my glorification. Yeah, it sometimes happens for us. We glorify the Lord, and after that, we're not thinking about the Lord. We sing nice kirtan and we think, how many people are going to come and praise me for that? That happens, but gradually we go beyond that. But Prahlad was not thinking like that. Okay? Yes.
And my second question was what does Hiranyakashipu represent? What does Prahalad represent? And what does Narasimha represent?
Okay. So Narasimha is of course ultimately the Lord. He represents the Lord as a protector. And I said that Hiranyakashipu represents the embodiment of supreme power materially. He got more power than anybody could have imagined. And despite getting that power, it was not that only at the end his power was taken away by Hiranyakashipu or by Narasimha. Even when he had the power, he was still not satisfied. So in one sense, the trajectory, we all are at a particular point in life. And we all will make decisions about where we want to go. So most people think I just need to get more power. It could be more physical power. It could be more financial power. It could be more political power. It could be various kinds of power are there. I just get more of these powers. Nowadays, it is all power is social media power. I get more and more followers. Then they think that if I become a celebrity, that is their inability. They think that I become a great person. So, but the point is that we think all this is power, but that power does not lead to satisfaction. But on the other hand, Prahlad never pursued external power. He focused on devotion. So Prahlad, so Hiranyakashipu represents the pursuit of power at the expense of everything else. And Prahlad represents the pursuit of devotion at the expense of everything else. Now, the wonderful thing is he didn't lose everything else. The Lord gave him everything else also at the end. But he did not care for those things. And the Lord reciprocated. Vamshidhar is a commentator on the Bhagavatam. He says, I forgot to mention this point. Thank you for your question. This Bhagavatam starts with the question that how is the Lord really equal to everyone? So he says, yes, the Lord was equal to both Hiranyakashipu and Prahlad because he let both of them come on his lap. Isn't it? But the fact that they both got on his lap, so in that sense, the Lord is equal to everyone. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you very much for the beautiful questions. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Prabhuji, for a very all-encompassing, enlightening, engaging class on this amazing pastime that spans so many chapters. You were able to do this in a very short time.